multifaceted morning session here on the topic why to participate. Gertrude Arnstein, in her classical ladders of participation, laid out several reasons to participate, ranging from empowerment to informing to pacifying and manipulating. All these are goals or reasons for participation, and there are different motives and also different policy aspects behind all of them. There are different modes of participation that may link with the different power structures, different cultural and heritage policies, and with other policies such as economic regeneration, welfare policies, integration. And so when one is talking about the reasons to participate, one is talking about participation for its own sake as opposed to participation serving other aims, other policy aims, instrumental aims. There are different actors involved in the participation. It's not a simple game. Each actor has its own goals and motives, and they might be instrumental or not. There are the heritage experts such as us, who are usually motivated by something like, or are often motivated by the authoritative heritage discourse as put by Laura Jane Smith, an agenda equaling heritage with common good, in a way. So here one might say that the idea of common good is not instrumental, but authoritative heritage discourse also involves maintaining a certain power position. When one is talking about the communities or active citizens or interest groups, they also have instrumental interests at stake in participation. They have their own specific goals and agendas, and they often also overlap with the institutions. There is no clear dividing line between the heritage experts and the communities. So the right to access heritages or the right to define them within the communities may also be instrumental. It may be a means to an end for the participants. There is no need to idealize any role, any position, neither the heritage expert position or the participant position. But heritage experts especially should be aware of their own position and attentive to competing aims and definitions. The negotiating processes don't automatically yield optimal solutions to everyone. There are compromises. What they should do is to ensure acknowledgement of different roles and positions, and to enable fair decisions for everyone based on mutually agreed heritage values and rights. By these words, I open this forum, and I invite our first speaker. Actually, our first speaker comes through the internet. She is Karima Benoun, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on cultural rights and a professor at the University of California. So please, Anna-Maja.
Dear colleagues and friends at Europa Nostra Finland's European Heritage Congress, it is my great pleasure to address you as you begin this important discussion on sharing heritage, citizens participating in decision-making. I regret that my travel schedule makes it impossible for me to be with you in person. but rest assured that I am with you in spirit. First, I would like to thank Europa Nostra and its esteemed president, Maestro Placido Domingo, for all their support for the mandate of the Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights and for the work on cultural heritage in particular, support which is greatly appreciated and which has made a significant contribution. I look forward to our continued collaboration toward our shared goals of defending cultural rights. The intentional destruction of cultural heritage was the first theme I chose to work on when I became the Special Rapporteur in November 2015, as I was, like so many people around the world, deeply horrified by the televised and openly proclaimed destructions of heritage by extremists in places like Syria. These were attempts to erase history and diversity and to harm other human beings, not just the objects destroyed. However, I have also been determined to take a holistic approach to cultural heritage protection, whether in situations of war or peace, by state or non-state actors, of tangible or intangible heritage, or whether in regard to well-publicized attacks or less well-known events, such as the terrible histories of destruction of the cultural heritage of indigenous peoples around the world. Cultural heritage is significant in the present, both as a message from the past and as a pathway to the future. Viewed from a human rights perspective, it is important not only in itself, but also in relation to its human dimension. While specific aspects of heritage may have particular resonance for and connections to particular human groups, all of humanity has a link to such objects and such heritage, which represents, after all, the cultural heritage of all humankind. The right of access to and enjoyment of cultural heritage forms part of international human rights law, finding its legal basis, inter alia, in the right to take part in cultural life. Cultural heritage is a fundamental resource for other human rights as well, in particular, the rights to freedom of expression, to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, as well as the economic rights of the many people who earn a living related to tourism based on such heritage, and of course, the right to development. The right of access to and enjoyment of cultural heritage includes the right of individuals and collectivities to know, to understand, enter, visit, make use of, maintain, exchange elements of, and develop cultural heritage, as well as to benefit from the cultural heritage and the creation of others. I believe it is essential to understand cultural heritage as not only a technical issue, but also as a human rights issue to which a human rights approach is essential. At the heart of the human rights approach are the questions of participation and consultation, and so I'm especially delighted that you will be discussing these important issues in your meeting. In my work on the topic of cultural heritage, I have always emphasized the need for consultation with all relevant stakeholders, whether at the local, national, regional, or international level, in regards to the diverse meanings of heritage, its interpretations, uses, and about all aspects of its protection, preservation, reconstruction, reestablishment, memorialization, and nomination to the UNESCO World Heritage List. I have heard from women and men on the ground about how they have been at times deeply affected when heritage with which they had close connections was reconstructed or used without any consultation with them or with the constituencies with which they identify. I have seen both the loss and the disconnection that this has caused, often in situations of conflict or post-conflict, in which it adds to the cumulative weight of other great losses. Cultural rights include the right to cultural syncretism. Human history demonstrates that cultures are often mixed and not fixed in time. In fact, much of what we consider heritage is the result of continuous recreation throughout history, with each layer adding to its meaning and its value. Because heritages are living resources, they should be open to ongoing interpretation and reinterpretation. In order to ensure that this is possible, participation has to be at the center, including participation in the identification, interpretation and development of cultural heritage, and the reformulation of the contents and contours of cultural identity. This involves deciding which cultural traditions, values, sites, or practices are to be kept, reoriented, revised, renegotiated, modified, or discarded in accordance with international human rights standards. Participation is also essential to avoid fixing cultural heritage into a single meaning and interpretation, which creates a division between those who are considered or consider themselves entitled to be the sole guardians of that heritage, and others. This process disconnects and alienates people from their heritage, emptying it of its meaning, and also of what made such heritage living resources for people in the first place. Without the continuous engagement and creativity of diverse people, cultural heritage is doomed to die. The best protection for heritage, ultimately, is found both in the work of local cultural heritage defenders and experts, whom we must find effective ways to support, and in the commitment of populations that are engaged and involved. All this necessitates participation and consultation. There are some difficult, outstanding issues to consider in regard to participation and consultation that I do not have time to fully consider today, but that I mark for your agendas in your discussions. These include what to do when diverse constituencies related to heritage have widely divergent views about what should be done, which is often the case, and how to consult those who have been displaced, and how to ascertain all the relevant constituencies to involve in consultations and take into consideration the different connections they may have to the heritage in question. We must more fully develop our understanding of the paradigms and meanings and requirements and methodologies and limitations of participation and consultation, taking into consideration both diverse popular views and the views of cultural heritage experts, especially at the local level. I hope the 3 reports that I and my distinguished predecessor have prepared on this topic, which you can find on the Mandate website, can be of help in this regard. Thank you all for your work defending cultural heritage and cultural rights, and for gathering together to discuss these important questions. Much needs to be done on this topic to learn from the errors of the past in the governance of cultural heritage, and to design new, participatory, inclusive, and human rights respecting approaches for the future. I wish you a most fruitful meeting, and I look forward both to reading its conclusion and to our future collaboration in these areas. Let me leave you with a reminder of what is at stake. In a poem entitled The Smothered Murmurs of History, the Algerian poet Salah Bedieri, himself a refugee from extremist violence in the 1990s, expressed the anguish many have felt after recent acts of cultural demolition. He gave voice to the fear that if unchecked, there will be more destruction of heritage to come. He wrote that, quote, "The people of the new millennium are determined to reduce their ruins to the dust of ruins." I would say it is up to all of us to work together to increase participation and involvement in heritage protection, and to make sure that what this poet feared, what so many fear, does not come to pass anywhere. Thank you.
All right, are there any immediate reactions to Karima's greetings? Or if not, then I suggest that we go on with the program, and I'm inviting Vice President Mylène Idol from the Observatory of Cultural Diversity in Geneva. Please use this. This does not work very well.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes. So thank you for giving me the floor. I am very honored. I am very honored to be here at this forum. My first official contact with Europa Nostra was, in fact, last year when we organized at the UN headquarters in New York a special event on the intentional destruction of cultural heritage with Karima Bennoune, the UN Special Rapporteur. And we were extremely pleased that President of Europa Nostra, Placido Domingo, opened that event with a video message. It was very important for us because it shows that we have a lot in common and many concerns in common, cultural heritage experts as well as human rights specialists. So unlike most of you, I am not a heritage expert professional. I am a human rights expert, and I have little experience with the technical issues relating to cultural heritage. My experience is with cultural rights, but I would like to also stress that although I'm also a UN human rights officer working with Karima Bennoune and before that with the former special rapporteur, I am not taking the floor before you today as a UN official because I took a special leave in this year to conduct my own personal studies, but also to work with this Observatory of Diversity and Cultural Rights, which is a research center also aiming at developing methodologies to understand how to implement cultural rights in various professional circles. I'm convinced that human rights specialists and academics from various disciplines, as well as cultural heritage experts, need to get together to unfold the many questions relating to participation and cultural heritage. As Karima stressed, we were all concerned by the massive destructions that happened in recent times, but you, cultural heritage professionals, and also in the human rights sphere, we all know for a long time that this is a problem and that there is a human dimension to cultural heritage. But at the same time, we are in a period to seize where we can further demonstrate, because we have the proof in the mass media, the importance of our actions and preserving cultural heritage and promoting human rights. I will shortly quote Placido Domingo when he participated in that side event, because what he said is that the cultural heritage is our anchor in time. It tells us the interconnected, closed stories of who we were in the past, who we are today, and who we could become in the future. And this is also exactly what cultural rights are about. It's about the capacity to imagine the world. And for this, we deeply need cultural heritage. So there are trends in international law that demonstrates that our two worlds, cultural heritage experts and human rights experts, are getting closer and interconnected. I see that personally more every day, and I'd be very eager to know what is your perspective. But basically, what we can notice is that indeed in human rights instruments, there is no cultural heritage per se, right to cultural heritage per se. You cannot find it in the text. But such references have clearly emerged through the practice of monitoring bodies and UN mechanisms. In parallel, and you probably know that much better than I do, the cultural heritage instruments, particularly at UNESCO, at the beginning didn't really have a human rights dimension. But in starting around the 2000s, there was a shift which has begun, and with more and more references to human rights, and in particular participation of concerned communities and people. So we also share something else in common, which is that most of the time we are said that what we do on culture, cultural heritage, or cultural rights is not the utmost priority. And at the same time, every day we hear that culture is to be resorted to fight fundamentalism, obscurantism, discrimination, and even poverty. I think this is a shortcut. It is not the real answer. My conviction is that the call for culture will only be useful if it also includes and integrates a human rights and cultural rights-based approach. And I will try to explain that to you today. So I'll make my presentation starting with a human rights-based approach to cultural heritage matters. And this entails going over a number of definitions and also a shift in paradigm. And I hope that this will be useful for us all. So what is a human rights-based approach to cultural heritage? I'm sure you do it already in much of your work, but the first step is, of course, to identify what are the human rights issues related to cultural heritage. And as mentioned by Karima Bennoune, having a human rights-based approach to cultural heritage obliges us to consider not only cultural heritage in itself, but in its human dimension, and the many links that and connections that people have with that cultural heritage. So this obliges to make understood that, of course, intentional destructions of cultural heritage is a human rights issue in itself, because beyond a cultural heritage, destructions target people and try to force them into specific identities and ways of life. It also obliges us to identify and combat destructions that, for example, in the name of development, which is also in the name of a specific world vision, also deprive people of their cultural heritage. This also entails interrogating processes through which cultural heritage is identified, selected, and how its significance is defined. And I refer to what you were saying earlier in your introduction, and I very much agree with what you were saying. And of course, selection processes in which state plays a main role are reflective of power differentials. And this is also true within communities. Communities are not just one block, and there are power differentials within all communities. And as you know, there are many ways in which culture may be used for political purposes. It can be for good reasons, such as promoting cultural diversity, of course. But it is also true that in our history and in today, we know that the arts, cultural heritage, history, cultural landscapes are used for propaganda purposes. Limited access to and enjoyment of cultural heritage may also be a tool to exert pressure against a particular people, or can result in discrimination against many groups in society who cannot access cultural heritage for a wide variety of reasons. And here I refer to women in particular, but also people living in extreme poverty, minorities, as well as people with disabilities. And exclusion is not only physical or economical, it can also be cognitive. And it's also how people can be excluded from participation, participating in interpretation, preservation, and safeguard policies, and the possibilities they have to review critically their own cultural heritage and that of the other. And of course, one key issue is how to resolve conflicts and competing interests over cultural heritage, whether this includes conflicts of interpretation about the significance given to a specific cultural heritage or economic interest. And I'm sure you face this in your work. So there are many, in fact, human rights norms which exist and which we can use to have a human rights-based approach to cultural heritage issues. So in international law, I'm sure you all know the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and there are also conventions which states, and many European states, most European states have ratified. In particular, the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, as well as the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And Karima Bennoune mentioned the right to participate in cultural life, which is one of the key provisions. And we also have the rights of persons belonging to minorities to enjoy their culture, the rights of indigenous peoples to maintain, control, protect, and develop their cultural heritage, the right to education, freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of religion and beliefs, and the right to take part in the conduct of public affairs. Together, these norms, in fact, have served to form the basis for a new right, which is a right to enjoy and access cultural heritage, and I will develop this later. So fundamentally, to offer you a short sentence in summary of what a human rights-based approach is, it's in fact a shift in perspective, because we don't work on needs, we work on rights. So we don't take, the objective is not to suppress the needs or to respond like this to the needs. It's a much forward-looking strategy which recognize that people have capacities, and I also refer to what you were saying in your introduction about empowerment. And in French, we say le pouvoir d'agir. Really, human rights is about empowerment, capacities. People have capacities, they have knowledge, and they want to share that knowledge, and we have to go and find this knowledge to realize rights. And also, there are obligations. So, as we identify rights holders, we also identify duty bearers. And capacities also mean, of course, that participation is, throughout human rights, one main principle. But now, let me go through a number of definitions. I am sure you know this one. It's the definition of culture that was presented at this main UNESCO conference in Mexico in 1982. So I will not read it. I let you read it and ask you what is missing in that definition. Is something missing? Of course, it's very wide. It was one of the first times that it was not only focused on the arts, and cultural heritage, much wider. But a number of researchers and activists have quite soon identified that the point that is missing is that the person is not here. Individuals are not here. You have a top-down definition. It's characterizing groups, but we don't talk about the relationship with the individuals and the people. So there was another definition, which was, those are working definitions, of course. We could spend the whole, week working on that and not agreeing, and there are many approaches, of course, but that is a working definition for the purpose of a human rights-based approach. And that is the definition that the Fribourg Group, I don't know if you heard of this group, which was also at the origin of this Fribourg Declaration on Cultural Rights, proposed that definition. And you see the shift in perspective. It's the person is at the center. So the term culture covers those values, beliefs, convictions, etc., through which a person or a group expresses their humanity and the meaning that they give to their existence. So that approach really founded, in fact, the definition of cultural rights as we understand it now at the United Nations. And this is the definition proposed of cultural rights of the UN Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights. At that time, the mandate holder was Farida Shahid. And this is the definition that she proposed. So I let you read it again, and to note that it's still with each person at the center, the person who will give meaning to their humanity and the meanings they give to their existence through inter alia, values, beliefs, etc., and ways of life. And here you already have the beginning of the right to access cultural heritage. They also protect access to cultural heritage and resources that allow such identification and development processes to take place. So what does it mean to define cultural heritage from a human rights, cultural rights perspective? So of course, you will see the first thing is that cultural heritage is considered as a resource, a very important resource. And this is where the value of cultural heritage lies from a human rights perspective. It is not a value in itself. And this entails several consequences. The first thing is that the people are the ones to designate what is important for them. So cultural heritage is not necessarily what is of outstanding universal value, but what counts and is of significance for people. I heard people, for example, in Nepal, defending the outstanding local value. And it was still outstanding, but a very specific local significance that would not appear clearly to external observers. It also entails that we find it is impossible to disconnect or even to distinguish tangible and intangible cultural heritage, because in fact the form cannot be separated from the meaning, and the meaning cannot be separated from the form. Also, it entails that if we speak of cultural heritage in the context of human rights, and if this entails taking into consideration the multiple heritages through which individuals and communities express their humanity, it's not only using one, it's a multiplicity and complexity of resources. And of course, multiple interpretations, that was also raised this morning. There are various degrees, there are various interpretations, and one difficulty, of course, is to encompass them all and to understand them all. I will go into that specific complexity a little bit later, but you also have around cultural heritage, of course, various peoples and communities, and they all have various degrees of relationships towards a specific cultural heritage. And when you enter the field of participation and consultation, that is something to take into consideration. And of course, communities are not only the linguistic, ethnic, religious communities, but you can also have heritage communities. And I heard also reference to the Faro Convention this morning by the men introducing the choir, the concert. And that convention refers to heritage communities which gather people around a specific cultural heritage. So here, yes, I'd like to finish by saying that, of course, and I'm sure we all agree here. I mean, I'm just offering my perspective and you have your perspective, but we all agree that cultural heritage has to be a living cultural heritage. So, as Karima was saying, cultural heritage which is not connected to people is doomed to die, but that also means that it is not a museum, it's not something we cannot touch, we cannot use. For example, policies of reconstruction have to integrate a plan about future destination and use. It's very important. What is it going to happen to that monument, for example? And reconstructions may not necessarily mean ex ante. And I refer again to what was said in the video about cultural syncretism, which also is a very important notion that is being developed in our field. So I'd like here to stress something, which is that cultural rights do not protect cultural heritage per se or in itself. It's a different approach. Cultural rights is about protecting the conditions allowing people to access, participate, and contribute to cultural life in a developing manner. However, these conditions are greatly jeopardized when cultural heritage is at risk or is being destroyed. So, therefore, destruction of cultural heritage must be considered as a violation of cultural rights, in particular when those destructions aim at targeting people or are made with total disregard to their relationships to specific heritages. Am I on time? Or? Yes. So here, now we are at the heart of the subject, which is how can we define the right to access and enjoy cultural heritage? Just to go over the few references in international law, of course, the Faro Convention is probably the first one to specifically mention that every person has a right to cultural heritage. Also, it was in the Fribourg Declaration, which is a civil society document. If you are interested, I have some copies of that document with me, but it's very easily accessible in many different languages on the internet. And now UN bodies. So the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights is one of the main United Nations bodies, an independent body composed of 18 experts from around the world, which is tasked with the issue of the implementation of cultural rights. And here in 2009, it started explicitly recognizing the right to have access to cultural and linguistic heritage and to that of the others. Of course, you will always find this balance between my cultural heritage and that of the other. It's not communities which are understood in their silo. It's much more open approach. And now, this definition of the UN Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights. So Karima Bennoune has read part of this definition in the video this morning. To describe what does access to an enjoyment of convey, so know, understand, enter, visit, etc. And what I have stressed, and I would like to continue reading that definition, is that therefore, individuals and communities cannot be seen as the mere beneficiaries or users of cultural heritage. They are participants. They make it a living cultural heritage. So effective participation in decision-making processes relating to cultural heritage is a key element of these concepts. So access, I touched upon this a little bit earlier. Access means, of course, physical access to cultural heritage, but also economic access, information access, and this also refers to the right to seek, receive, and impart information about cultural heritage. Also cognitive information, education about cultural heritage, and also access to decision-making and monitoring procedures. So this definition, also, in fact, and this right is really emerging in the sense also that more and more partners, actors are using it now, including at the Human Rights Council just last year, which is the main gathering of states working on human rights issues at the United Nations, and adopted last year a resolution by consensus recognizing that accessing and enjoying cultural heritage is part of cultural rights. I'm soon finished. Just to finish with a little bit of complexities, and here I told you earlier that I wanted this is also something that we need to work a lot more on, and I think for this we need to enter into much more in-depth collaboration with cultural heritage experts like yourselves, which is that there are varying degrees of access and enjoyment that may be recognized, which take into consideration the diverse interests of individuals and groups according to their specific relationship with cultural heritage. And there are many. We have a first list, but that list is not limitative. And of course, the first kind of communities that we have identified are the originators or the source communities, also communities which consider themselves as the custodians or guardians of a specific cultural heritage, that is a language often used by indigenous peoples. And people who are keeping cultural heritage alive or have taken responsibility for it. Maybe they are not the source communities, but they have taken that responsibility. A second group that we have identified is individuals and communities, including local communities, who consider the cultural heritage in question as an integral part of the life of the community, but may not be actively involved in its maintenance. But there are also scientists, so I include also cultural expert professionals and artists, and also the general public accessing the cultural heritage of others. So these groups, this paragraph, in fact, I took it from a thematic report of the Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights, and we really hope that further work will be done to unpack the ways to include those groups and communities. But of course, and as Karima said, we could spend the whole day addressing the complexities, but I wanted to throw to you another one, which is what is a community? And that is quite a difficult issue. Karima Benoun, for example, warns us very, very often that the term is often used without any definition. And sometimes it is too often to suggest hierarchy, homogeneity, exclusivity, structure, formality. And most of the time we forget that communities are diverse and complex in themselves. And by only talking or entering into relationship with representatives, maybe self-proclaimed, not self-proclaimed representatives, then there is a risk of continuing situations and I mean, confirming situations of oppression within the community. So participating is not only the representatives of a community, it's going much, much further than this. So of course, there are a few issues to raise. Karima raised some of them. I'm also presenting to you some others, hoping they will be useful to you. Those questions, in fact, were identified through also workshops that were done and a program of observation done particularly in France with one of our partners called Réseau Culture 21, which tries to work with professionals, various professional workers, to identify the questions to ask, and based on the Fribourg Declaration, to try to see what are the cultural rights that are implemented or not implemented in various professional circles, one of them being cultural heritage professionals. And those are some of the questions that were identified. So who is part of the heritage community? Who should be here? And who is not here? And why they are not here? Who decides who is part of the community? Is there a group of individuals that claim priority over a specific cultural heritage, and with which legitimacy? Which role can people play in the identification and development of the heritage? In which way can they contribute to making heritage a common heritage? How can a specific cultural heritage become a common cultural heritage after a situation of conflict, etc., etc.? So I am sure that the discussions at the forum will raise further questions based on your own experience. As I said, I truly believe that these questions and the responses to them can only be unfolded through discussions by cultural professionals themselves, and also in partnership with various academic disciplines, including human rights experts. So, thank you for your attention.
Milen, thanks for your excellent talk and for the good questions. We have some time for discussion if someone would like to ask a question or make a comment. I have one question for you. You opened up with with referring to the recent destructions of cultural heritage and I would like to take up the example of the destruction of the ancient ruins in Palmyra. There, I started to think whose rights are at stake there? Are they the local stakeholders' rights who are also the beneficiaries of the World Heritage Site, or is it the Syrian national community, or is it the international heritage community, and who should one participate?
I think it's all of them. It's not, that is what I was saying, it's not because you have various communities that you have to rely only on one. And I come back to what you were saying, it's not only the experts, but the experts have to be here. It's the locals, but of course people, the displaced persons, for example, have also something in common, I mean, the relationship to this heritage. So there are various communities. The difficulty is to know and identify whether there is somewhere a priority. And that I don't have the answer to you because I think it's a case-by-case approach.
Yes.
And my intuition is always to go to the local, but that's not always true. For example, we were visiting with Karima Benoun monasteries, Orthodox monasteries in Kosovo. And of course, I mean, people are far away now, most of them. So it's really a case by case, and I think it takes a lot of time and energy to prepare the ground, to understand who should take part, and to be sure someone is not missing. Because also the ones who are just living the cultural heritage are very important. And I'm coming back to Kosovo, because that was one of my most recent experience. I don't know whether there are people here in the room from that part of Europe, but we were visiting an Orthodox church in Kosovo, and this Kosovo Albanian was saying, you know, that's also my cultural heritage, because that playground, I used to go there as a kid. So it's not a religious relationship, it's just that it's part of his life, and he wanted also his kids to be able to continue that specific relationship. So it's just all those little things. So I think it takes a lot of time. I'm not, have I answered your question?
Absolutely, thank you. Are there any other questions to me? Yes, there. Please use the microphone. Can someone bring the...
Yes, thank you very much for that very interesting speech. And I think it's very interesting to hear the increasing role of heritage on the perspective of human cultural rights. I have a special question. We have created the motto Sharing Heritage for the European Cultural Heritage Year. And I think on that perspective, in that content, it's very interesting to discuss about the role to find different perspectives on cultural heritage. We have so many places all over Europe, all over the centuries, borders changed. And we have important cultural heritage places in our countries, which are influenced by different cultural exchange and from different countries, from different people. And on that content, I think it is so interesting that we have to discuss about the increasing role to have the right on different perspectives on our local, regional, European heritage. I think we have a lot of influence from France in Germany. We have influence from Italy in France, and so many exchange about all centuries. And I think it is a chance to discuss in the European year about that new role of right on cultural heritage, on a perspective of different perspectives on the cultural heritage by that role of exchange in our human history in Europe. Do you agree with that?
I think. Agree.
Yeah.
No, I fully agree with that, of course. And the difficulty is when those interpretations are controversial or conflictive. So and at the same time, I believe that therefore you have a great opportunity to discuss those controversies and to make a step further. And that's why I included that question on how can cultural heritage become a common cultural heritage? Because it is common, but with a conflicting interpretation. So there's always a work of interpretation. It's never finished, in fact. You never finish reading a cultural heritage. So I fully agree, yes.
Thank you very much for the question, and thanks again to Mylène. And now we are moving on, and next we have Lia Gilardi, who is the director of the Noima Culture and Planning and Place Mapping consultant company. Please, Leah. Half an hour.
How much time?
Half an hour.
Half an hour? 20 minutes? Half an hour? It's on? It's on, yeah. Okay, good. Okay. Right. Right, good morning. Thank you for the invitation to come and speak to this group of people. The last time I was in Turku, it was just before the city became capital of culture. And my job, as always, was to work with the politicians and the policymakers in terms of place making. How would this city look like in 10 years' time? Who would be involved in the economic, social, cultural life of this city? What are we adding when we become the vitrine for showcasing our heritage, our culture, our creative industries, etc. So in essence, my job is the placemaker, but from a point of view of a cultural planner, which is a notion that was developed many years ago in the 1970s in America, North America, and in Australia. At the time, communities there were suffering by the industry, the loss of industry, and some of the communities were isolated, physically isolated in their cities, in deprived neighborhoods. So what they decided to do is really to take matter in their own hands and develop their social, urban tools, really, for participating in making their neighborhood better, in improving their conditions. So I'm coming from that perspective, which is not necessarily just bottom-up or versus top-down. My perspective is to take heritage and culture as embedded in the DNA of place. So I see place as really as a system of relations. So today, or right now, in the next 10 minutes or so, I will not be talking about heritage in isolation from the economic development of a place, community participation, etc. Because for me, I'm talking about cities, and cities are, to me, microorganisms in constant state of change. Okay, now, what do I see when I go and talk to the politicians and the policymakers? What do they want? The first thing that they want is, we want the city to be competitive. We want the creative class to be here. We want many tourists to come, and we want our communities to be happy and healthy. Right, you would say, tall order, guys, considering that we're living in a globalized world to begin with. We are also living in cities that are increasingly segregated, but we are also living in cities that are increasingly urbanizing, and there's a lot of pressure from people coming into cities to find jobs, to find their identity, to live a different life, to be themselves, to achieve what they couldn't do in their own villages, in their own countries, etc. So we are talking about places that are in constant state of change. We are talking about microorganisms in movement. I can't remember whether it was Jane Jacobs, the American urbanist, who said cities are like porridge, and they keep bubbling up. So if you imagine cities like, I know it's a bit gross in the morning or something, those of you maybe don't like porridge, but it's, I think as a metaphor, it's interesting to imagine the cities like bubbling all the time, up and down, moving in constant state of like molecules in movement. Now, that's our heritage, that's our culture, and how do you grasp that in policies, etc., is sometimes my task. Whether I succeed or not, that's another matter. But what do I see? What do I see often? One thing that is interesting to me is that people start by identifying less and less with their country and more with their cities. Well, that's interesting, because you're thinking of heritage in a big narrative way. Then suddenly the big narrative shrinks down to the city, where you are at that point in time. And if at that point in time, and if we consider the world is a constant, people are in a constant mobility state. You know, you could be here for 4 years, and then you could be in New York for the next 10 years. You could be working with big organizations, etc. People tend to identify with the place where they are at the moment, where they find their friends, where they find their colleagues, where they find their living. Forget about their families. You know, I'm Italian originally, so people would think, oh my God, where is your family? My family lives in Italy. I live in London for 30 years. I work in Sweden, I work in Denmark. I've just come back from Moldova, and so on. So our social networks is in the city where we live, and we tend to identify a lot more with the city where we live. So what consequences has that got in reference with the heritage? We need to think about it. And how do we participate in activating that heritage is my question. Cultural tourism is extremely important. We have figures that shows that the World Tourism Organizations that 46% of tourism is now about cultural tourism. Now, but the question is, what do we mean by cultural tourism? There are variations of cultural tourism, so we can't go through the whole thing. But bear in mind that even when we talk about cultural tourism, there isn't just one. There is also, cultural tourism these days is also going to a place where you can see dolphins, where you can go and save whales, where you can go and learn about how to make a piece of pottery, or you can go and learn about weaving something, or you can go and learn about make polenta. That's cultural tourism. That is a movement whereby you go and learn from a community or a place or a city, and you let yourself be contaminated by that heritage, maybe in food, maybe in craft, maybe in music, maybe in whatever field of endeavor or culture. So you let yourself be contaminated and you learn from that. So in a sense, you take away an experience. That's cultural tourism today. It becomes a productive experience from the point of view of the individual that goes there. So it's not just simply a question of how many hotel beds do we need and so on. But here is what I find. Here is what the politicians understand of this particular competition and cultural tourism, etc. It's the banality of it that kills me most of the time. This was just like maybe 5 days after Britain voted to Brexit, to leave the EU. The French put out this advertising on the internet everywhere. And it plays on all the stereotypes. Tired of the fog, which fog? London, presumably. Okay, Dickensian times. So they were implicitly making some kind of, I don't know, criticism about Britain, and then saying, try the frogs. Yeah, and then it comes up, Bienvenue à Paris, La Défense, which is this big, shiny, economic, kind of functional building. Whereas when you look at the Global Power Index, in 2016, top city was London. And I live in London. I cannot believe that London was top city in 2016. Now, if you look at the words in the word cloud, we do that often with communities in terms of perceptions. What perceptions do you have of this city? What do you value most? What is your problem? What comes out is, it's a whole, culture is very important. Culture is very important, it seems, in that global index. But of course, you wouldn't know that by now the Arts Council of England has cut 3/4 of the budget for culture. And there is virtually no art and music classes in schools anymore. So to me, it's becoming a cultural desert, that thing. But culture is still important in the mindset of people. So history is very important. You know, 3/4 of which is made up. It's an invention, but it's an interesting mythology, especially the one about the monarchy. Big Ben, wow, yes. Rain, busy. So we get into stereotypes most of the time, but the politicians like that. And when they see their top city, they are happy. Now the question is, where are the people in these things? Where are the real people who live in these cities? How do we find them? How do we find the methodologies for city making, for making cities that are balanced, equitable, livable, that offer really opportunities for people to express their human capacities, the human capital of things. So we don't find them in the kind of current thing. What we find is, this was Rio de Janeiro. Well, no wonder you had people saying, well, we need money for hospital. And this argument, I'm not particularly keen on this argument either, because it's black and white. So you know, but the ordinary people end up by seeing culture really as a competitor to scarce resources, to the resources they don't have in terms of housing, etc. So we need to start thinking in terms of, my view is, we need to start thinking about cities more like ecosystems, where the hardware of the city, the housing, the transport, the economy, etc., is interconnected with the software, where everything is linked. The culture of the place is the key. And we start our policies from the culture of the place. We need, in essence, that's my argument, and I could end here basically today if we wanted to have a debate. We need to argue from development from within. It's not so much bottom-up or top-down, because the top-down is there. In Sweden, for example, yesterday we have 4 days. We have 4 days of discussion how to make a new town in the north of Stockholm. The tools are there in the planning department for consulting, engaging, etc. But is there real engagement? When you have people living already in those neighborhoods who can barely speak Swedish, who have lost their jobs, who are completely disenfranchised, who the kind of main expression of cultural interest is burning cars over the weekend, or rioting, or blowing up supermarkets or something. Now, you have to take that into consideration when we talk about cohesive cities, cities for everyone, cities where heritage is respected, etc. I'm a sociologist by background, actually, by the way, so I observe society all the time, 24/7. So what I'm arguing for is, if we think of heritage, culture, and people, and economic development, we cannot see them distinctive. We have to see them connected together, and the policies have to come from within the city, from what that city has in terms of resources, which I define in a broader term, tangible, intangible. What I'm interested in is getting at the uniqueness of the DNA of a place, and then developing the policies in a kind of concentric circle whereby I offer opportunities to everybody to fulfill their potential, to find jobs, to live well in a place. So it's a people-centered approach. It's not a policy-centered approach. It's a people-centered approach. And well, local development, because that's what I'm interested in. It's local development. Local development is based on a deep understanding of the resources you have. When we were here many years ago, we spent a long time going around the city, taking pictures, talking about the Swedish, Finnish heritage, how important that is, the archipelago, the land, and the water, the grid form of the cities, the functionalist architecture, and so on. And we put all that into the DNA of Turku. And we started devising projects and ideas which were urban, heritage, cultural, and some of them fitted into the program for the City of Culture, and they were implemented also. So how much time do I have? 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So how would it happen? How does this method work, essentially? Well, the first principle is use what you have. Don't kind of engineer big events, big things that do not belong to your place, because you're going to have a clash of cultures. Not everybody will like it. At the end of the day, it will take too long for the city really, to metabolize that big building, that big event, that big cultural quarter, etc. It will take too long. And the political cycle is too short. So here is a warning for the politicians. You could be voted out if you get the wrong thing. So use what you have, maximize what you have, activate what you have, connect your resources to the people. Establish methods of real engagement on small scale projects. So what you do, you start from micro projects, like a little bit like acupuncture projects. And you think, we put a little bit of energy in this particular neighborhood or on this particular heritage project. We involve the stakeholders that are related to that particular thing. But the key thing is also never to leave it just to the experts. What we need in this system, no offense to you guys, is just to say we need collaborative approaches. We need to collaborate. And in a city where you see the mayor sitting down with artists, psychologists, ethnographers, representatives of the local community, children, women, etc., working on a project on a small scale. Now, that project on a small scale, I can guarantee to you, it delivers results, and it shortens the span between talking, rhetoric, and action. That's why I'm saying use smaller projects in a kind of adding bits and pieces as you go along, but you need a vision for that first. You need your mayor, you need your people to contribute to that vision, where you want to be in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, whatever. Within that vision, within the leadership, the shared leadership, you can then start doing your little project in an incremental, iterative process. And then something will happen. But basically, we don't have time, but this is how I can see this process happening. And you see at the center there, you imagine Turku, your urban and cultural DNA, and then you do projects that are kind of interact in different fields, in the field of the urban, the place, in the field of people. How many skills do we need? What skills have we got? What kind of communities have we got living here? What can they bring to the table in terms of contributing to making our city more innovative, creative, etc.? Yeah, that's it. Tools. There are many tools, maps, mental maps. I love mental maps. You can form image banks. You can mind map. You can do whatever. And there are many tools from sociology, from artists can use all these tools. So there are toolboxes everywhere for this. But I think what counts is the principles, and that's it. So there was just a cute example I just wanted to quote from Italy, a town of 50,000 inhabitants called Mantua, which is up there on the left. Lots of heritage, Gonzaga, Renaissance, etc. Fantastic place. But 20 years ago, they were in a crisis because their tourism, they were worried about tourism, their tourism was one-day tourism. So the people came there in the morning by coach, left in the evening, left behind a lot of rubbish, etc., ate one sandwich barely, didn't stay in the hotels, vaguely saw one or two of the key monuments of that, understood nothing of it probably, and then moved on. No, sorry, but that's how it happens sometimes, because you just do cities because you have to do cities. Because then you Instagram them, you Instagram your pizza and whatever. So then they moved to Verona and Venice, and that's it. So that was a problem. So what we did by using this method of mapping and thinking from within, we kind of found out that there were a number of resources that the city didn't know they had, which were alternative to the actual heritage. And these were small-scale publishing houses, booksellers, art booksellers, etc. In a town with 50,000 inhabitants, maybe you had 10 of these, which were really clustered in the center of the city. Now, for an Italian city, something like that is a mighty good resource, I tell you. So what we did, we put together all these booksellers, all these things, and we developed the idea of having a literature festival in the city. So we said this city is so well structured from the urban texture point of view that it could host a small scale, we thought, festival and invite writers, poets, and people to come and read their books, talk, have common discussions, so that Mantua become a citadel, a civic citadel, a citadel of exchanging ideas, etc., which was related to the theme of books. And so we did. Now the festival is the biggest in Italy. And if there are Italians here, they will know. It's too big as far as I'm concerned, but it's become the kind of new tool. The image of the city has completely changed now, of course. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leah. A time for one quick question or comment. Yes.
Have you ever come across any policymakers who've decided? Have you ever come across any
Strange box.
policymakers who have decided that they prefer not to listen to you?
Yes.
If so, what have you done and how have you overcome that?
You let them sink. Or, you know, what can you do? They don't listen sometimes because they are worried. They don't want to take risks. Because this is one of the problems. You know, the political cycles, etc. The community on the ground are pushing for some change. You propose some ideas, they think they are outlandish. They don't believe they can implement those ideas, or they don't want to implement the ideas. And I think the key problem here is the lack of risk-taking and the lack of leadership and vision, I think. Because some cities really want to, it's almost as if they want to keep their town like that. Because, you know, don't rock the boat, in English, I think you say that. Don't rock the boat. Now, the don't rock the boat cities are sinking now, faster and faster, into decline. I'm sorry to say, it's got nothing to do with me. It's just like you observe it. You observe it. So in an ideal world, you would want a city that is always looking forward, progressing, like a natural system. You have resources, natural systems like in nature, they are always looking at the future. They are always innovating. Organically, they are innovating. But there are cities that really don't do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks once again to Leah. We are moving on to the tools that Leah was mentioning, and we have a group presenting the York Past and Present project. Professor Helen Graham, Leanne Brigham, and Richard Brigham from York Past and Present, Karen Brookfield, Heritage Lottery Fund, UK.
Hi everyone, good to see you all here. Thank you so much for inviting us to speak. So, my name's Helen from the University of Leeds. My name's Leanne Brigham, and from York Past and Present.
I'm Richard Brigham from York Past and Present.
Right, so we're going to talk about some work that we're doing together in York. And I guess like so many people already who have spoken today, we kind of think about heritage as the things that we think are important, that we value. But the question that's been driving our work together is to really ask, if this is what heritage is, why is it so hard to become actively involved in shaping decision-making around heritage and around local place? So, York Past and Present, where did it all begin?
York Past and Present began out of frustration that museums and libraries around York were not taking care of their heritage. we were wanting to get into simple places that were going to be destroyed and photograph them to form our own projects, and they were saying, no, you can't do that, and these buildings were getting lost forever. We figured we couldn't be the only people out there that felt like this. So we formed a group on Facebook, and it rocketed. I think we've got about 17,000 members close now. And we use these people to actively get participated in history and heritage, to try and persuade the council into sometimes stupid and wacky ideas, but that actually work, and it goes well. We completed a lot of projects with the cities and with working with them, and we have a lot of arguments as well. So I mean, it's a good thing in a way.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah,
that's
we'll
right
talk
there.
a bit later on some of the successes and some of the frustrations.
Okay, yeah, we'll come a bit later on to some of the frustrations and some of the successes of the York past and present work. But the reason why we started to work together was because I was running a research project with lots of other people in the UK, different people who were situated in quite different places and locations within heritage. So, for example, people who were working as funders, Karen Brookfield, who was going to be with us today from the Heritage Lottery Fund, but unfortunately couldn't join us, but also people working in national museums, people working in local government contexts as conservation officers, as well as people who were activists about heritage in their own places. And so it was through that work that I first met you, and we started with York Civic Trust, Peter Brown, who was director then, and York's Alternative History, which looks at the radical and political histories of York, to start to work on this question. How could we increase participation in decision-making within the city? I find this green box a bit disturbing. So what we did, first of all, was try to understand what the political culture of the city was. And we came across certain tendencies, and I don't think this is just about York. I think this is kind of where a lot of liberal democracies are at the moment. For example, I think it's fair to say there was a very big kind of them and us kind of culture coming up. So the idea that them, they, the decision makers, are a long, long, long way away from us, and we never get to know anything about what's going on. There's kind of really big thing about consultation, wasn't there? The words fig leaf came up over and over again, sort of the metaphor that, you know, consultation happens after the decision's really been made. So there's a sense that it was just kind of window dressing that came afterwards. There's a very strong feeling about that. And then there was a kind of like, don't you think, there still is quite a lot of this, isn't there? Kind of they, a bit useless, and the big they.
They are very useless.
So there was a kind of sense of that.
Really, yeah.
But at the same time, when we talked to the decision makers, there was also a kind of feeling of we're really fed up with being attacked all the time. There's kind of sense of like personal threat a lot of the time within this kind of, you know, quite problematic democratic culture. So our local press, the kind of comments on there are often very negative, and it doesn't create a very positive culture for democratic collaboration. And I think also, one of the real problems with the consultation culture, even from people who initiated it, was there a perception that it wasn't particularly inclusive. It was only the usual suspects, just the people who normally get involved that get involved. And so actually the whole system was really not working, I think, to be fair. And so one of the things we started to think about is, can we create a more democratic culture within the city in order to increase participation? So that's what we've been working on. And so in the project generally, so this project was UK-wide, so there's work going on in Stoke-on-Trent, there was work going on in Scotland, so it wasn't just a York-based project. But from this, we developed some kind of quite pragmatic tactics to try and change and shift some of the ways in which this culture wasn't working. So in a way, really like what Leah was saying about the idea that, you know, cities are ecosystems, but so are democracies in a way, and they're kind of, you know, you need to think of them together. So we're trying to think, well, how can we start to shock and change the system that we're part of? And I won't work through all of them because we're going to talk through some concrete examples, but I think one of the key things, and York past and present, the work that Rich and Leanne are doing is such a fantastic example of that, is just do something. Yeah. So just start something.
Yeah, just whatever idea enters your head. If you have an idea on the morning, go ahead.
try it out.
Yeah.
It's better to try these things than do nothing.
Yeah, not necessarily feeling like you have to wait for permission from professionals or from experts, but just kind of roll your sleeves
Go
up.
ahead. I mean, one of the first things we did is when we asked permission to do tours of a certain building in York, we were told we couldn't do it. There'd be no sustainability to the amount of people that would be interested in going round an empty, derelict, boring old 19th century building. 3 years later, we still take 60, 70, 80 people a week around this building. There is sustainability. The people in charge are wrong, but it's getting them to admit they're wrong and looking at a different way to approach things and a different way to do things. And the fact that it might be a stupid idea, and it might be something you've never tried, but you still need to give it a try. That's the key thing behind it. Don't know the meaning of the word.
No, it might be something that might fail, but at least try.
Yeah.
If you don't try, you're never going to know, which is one of the arguments that we've taken. We've always said, look, if we try and it fails, fair enough, at least we've tried. But don't just not try just because you're scared that it might fail.
I think we've always said if we're going to fail, let's fail doing something massive.
Let's fail big.
So this actually takes us to some of the successes, some of the things that have really kind of come out of the work that you've done as York Past and Present. So setting up the Facebook group has led to things like what you just talked about, Richard, actually, is that Leanne's running tours of the Guildhall in York. So how many people have you taken round now? Loads and loads, hasn't it?
The last count was just over 5,000 people in 3 years. But again, no sustainability. Well, it proves that there was. So unfortunately, they've come to an end now because the Guildhall is being
wrecked, killed.
Which actually leads us to some of the recent frustrations. So, what's happening with the Guildhall? So, what is the Guildhall, first of all, for people who've never been there?
Guildhall is a 13th century building in York. It was put there in the 13th century, remodernised again in the 14th and 15th century to what it is today. It was bombed in 1942 and rebuilt back to how it was in its Victorian image. And it's a beautiful building, but only ever used by the district council. It's a huge, huge place, but it's just the public have no access to it unless there's something like a fair, and then they only get to see one part of the historic building. It's a real shame. So we took people around here and got them interested in the building and the history of it. And then it was decided that it really needed to be maintained. So they were going to build a restaurant on it. They were going to put a cafeteria in it. They were going to stop all public access. They were going to bash a hole in one of the sides of the building to make a door. And this is a Grade 1 listed building, you know. There's no real caring about the heritage or culture. It just seems as though it's a good money-making idea.
So I think this is one of those examples that all the speakers this morning have already spoken about, is when there are conflicts in what, you know, various people who believe it's their heritage, who care about it, who want to do the best thing for it, have different ideas about what that might be. So there was clearly a kind of strong sense from the City Council that it was necessary in order to sustain the material fabric of the building, for it to generate more income than it currently was. And so this has led to the idea, which has now been passed through the planning committee, of a new complex, which would include restaurants and cafes. And at stake specifically was the idea of a new door that would connect the cafe into the Guildhall, which was one of the issues that obviously you and many people within your group were kind of contesting. So I think one of the things, because it was, you know, like all conflicts.
It was.
Pretty.
There was that many bad things about the ideas, and there was that many people that stood up and said, we don't want this, that they went ahead and did it anyway. And it was the fact of they had plans for this building. When they showed the plans of what they were going to do in 2015 and 2016, everybody said, yeah, I quite like this. And then unknown to them, in 2017, the plans are completely different, but the council still sign on them saying, yeah, these are our plans, you've seen them, you've agreed. And they haven't. They've agreed on all the plans, but because it's been passed, they're allowed to change the plans as much as they want to change them now it's passed. That isn't heritage. Heritage should be, if the plans are changed, it has to go back and be re-looked at. It should be as simple as that.
So I think, yeah, one of the things we want to draw out of that in the second part of our presentation, I suppose, is how we can really design much better approaches to what is normally referred to as consultation. So much more long-term, sustained, open conversations about the significance of a place that mean that those that care about it can be involved actively throughout the process. So we know there are always examples that are slightly frustrating, but I suppose we really want to focus on how in future cases, which is the case we're going to come on to in a moment, we can work with the council to design something much more satisfactory that transforms really those relations and that negative democratic culture that we spoke about earlier on. So that's, we're going to come on to that just in a sec. How long have we got left?
Well, say 7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay. Right, so let's take 2 minutes just to reflect a little bit on one of the things you've learned. So working with Richard and Leanne, it's been amazing to see you, Richard, actually, we were saying earlier on when walking over, when you first met me, you said something like, the thing is, when you write an email to someone, because you work in a university, they're more likely to write back and agree to meet you. And at the time, that wasn't your experience, was it?
Oh, it was. We'd gone down to the city council to talk to one of the archaeologists there, and because we were just nothing to do with heritage, we were told, oh, well, he'll be back in a few weeks. And then we got to know Helen, and we both went up on the same day. We went up on the morning and never saw anybody, and Helen goes up there, and, well, miraculously, he's there.
So we're really aware, I suppose, through working together, just that inequity in who gets access to who and on what basis. But one of the really interesting things about York Past and Present becoming a major phenomenon within York, seriously. In 3 years, 17,000 people like this Facebook group. They have meetups which 200 people come to. It's very, very active, very dynamic. But it now means that you kind of get access.
Yeah, it means
because you've become a little bit like special as well.
If we refer to them and us, where I was a us and they were a them, you know, they had the access and I didn't. Now I seem to be on that side. I have access to people and other people look at me going, yeah, but it's all right for you. You've got access, and it's finding a way to change it that everybody has that access that we currently have.
Yeah, you were talking about like the idea of like security clearance or something. It's something about when you become well networked within a place. It's almost like you've got kind of implicitly got this kind of security clearance to know more about what's going on. But often you're told things in confidence that you can't then share with other people. This is kind of like how places work, isn't it? Like we all know this. It's like realpolitik. So we're talking about participation. We have to understand some of those like just the realities of social interactions within places and within democracies. But we kind of don't want to just leave it at that, do we? No. We don't want to just like, you've got in and that's great and leave everybody else on the outside. It's actually about like making a more fundamental transformation of the culture. So one of the things we're really interested in doing, and in common with what Leah was saying as well, is we really want that so many people have got so much they know about places, they've got so much energy and enthusiasm for the places in which they live, but at the moment there aren't always ways for that to be unleashed and for that to really be a massive, really enable a place becoming brilliant, basically. Yeah. So we want to explore ways of doing that. So you're thinking about a change for York Past and Present?
We're going to change the way we do it. We're going to try and get more people interested in not the political side, but more the heritage side and the understanding about heritage and trying to take an interest in being really caring about what you do. And that way, the more people that have that, they can have more of an influence over what the city councils and the people in charge, they can have that influence over them to change a decision instead of just having to put up with it.
It's not just that, we're trying to change people's opinions to say, well, look, we've mentioned to the group that we'd like to do certain projects, and we've got members coming up to us and saying, well, why? What's the point? We won't get listened to. We're trying to change people's opinion on that. We're trying to say, well, look, try not to have that opinion. Don't sit in your armchair and moan about it. Actually, get off your bottoms and let's do something.
Yeah.
It's kind of working, but it's still difficult.
And one of the things, I suppose, has been a really positive outcome of all the work we've done together, is that we're able now to work in collaboration with the City of York Council on what they're calling the Castle Gateway, which is a particular area of the city, which includes Clifford's Tower, which you can see there in the top right-hand corner. And one of the things that we're doing is to try and take some of this kind of, let's just get on with it and do something and share ideas and what's important about a place, but to design a process that will enable anyone who wants to take an active role in that to do that. So in other words, we do need structures and processes to enable open, transparent, democratic engagement, which takes us beyond the security clearance approach to place, which is often an issue. So one of the things we're doing is sort of designing a three-step process that will take us through and intersect with formal decision-making processes by the executive of the City Council and the planning committee. So in the first phase, we want to really unleash all of the ideas that people have about the place. So we're inviting anyone who's got something to share. They could be passionate about trees or otters in one of the rivers that run through the area, or Jewish history because of the significance of Clifford's Tower to the Jewish communities worldwide, or it could be to do with the radical histories of protests within the area. We're inviting anyone who's got anything to contribute to lead an event, share what they like about or what they know about that place, as a way for us to collaboratively develop a statement of significance for the area that can feed into the master planning process. We're also thinking about, what do you want to do there? What do you actually, just imagine your ideal day in that area in 10 years' time. What would you be doing? Would you be having a picnic? Would you be going on a tour? Would you be cycling through it? What would you be buying if you were buying something? And so we're going to use that to develop a collaborative brief that we're going to hand over to the master planners. And the aim is to sustain this community involvement all the way through the process. We're going to take disagreement head on. So there will be disagreements, we know that. There are obvious tensions within the area around uses. Specifically, there's a car park issue that we need to resolve. But what we're going to do is look at that head on. So not hide away from disagreement, but try and create community-led collaborative research projects to understand how, what are the issues here, what are the great ideas from elsewhere that we can learn from, and to really push that through and intersect that through that into the formal decision-making process. And ultimately, I think to see the development not as being something that's done to the place by people who are outside, who are the developers, but to see making the place as an ongoing unfolding of what the place is, and in sustain the community involvement all the way through. So it's not like a place is being handed over at the end, but there is a collaborative sense of the production of what it is all the way through. So that's a really positive thing that's come out of all the successes and some of the frustrations, some of the things we've learned throughout the project. So I think that's really what we wanted to share with you today. So, just to finish off. So I suppose what we want to do is turn all of these kind of things that we noticed that were more negative or weren't working in a democratic culture into what the positives might be. So rather than a them and us, what we really want to do, which is so much in the ethos of what you've always done, is to sort of share responsibility for change. So it's not just about expecting someone else to do it.
No.
But taking responsibility.
Taking responsibility and leading it to do it yourself.
Yeah. And I think really trying to integrate better participatory and formal or representational decision-making processes. I think that's where a lot of the tensions come, is how to take really community-led work, like the work you've done, but then how that intersects with the planning committee or planning process is a real tension point we want to do more work about. Starting really early. So problem is consultation. The reason why people use the word fig leaf is because it's like it happens afterwards. Even if that isn't true, it feels like it is. So by starting early, we want to have these kind of ongoing conversations and a sense that what we're producing will be open to change through that. And the other thing, I suppose, just to get decision makers really involved, I'm expecting them to come on the tours and get involved in drawing things with 5-year-olds and all of that. So people are actually creating the social possibilities for change through the process itself.
It's very difficult. York is a very 1950s run establishment. I'm sorry to say, it really is. It's a bunch of ostriches that just stick their head in the sand and pay no attention to anything modern day. If you have an idea, then it's a bad idea.
So if York is porridge, I think we want to just really turn the heat up a little bit and make sure that all of the bubbles are coming to the surface. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much for your energetic presentation. York was my studying town, and this brought me back vivid memories. Any immediate questions? Is all this work done by? Is it done voluntarily? How much time and effort are you actually putting into it?
At times we're at it 7 days a week. It's the hardest job I've never got paid for.
That's quite admirable. It's really and what's the size of the group, the sort of core group involved in this?
What's the size?
Yeah, well, how many people are sort of actively involved?
Oh God, there's a couple of thousands.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people do. Sorry. A lot of people do the very own things. You know, we've got people in the group who are writing books for the very first time on the history of yacht. They've never written a book in their life, but they've been inspired by what they've learned to go and write books. And so, you know, there's various people doing various different projects all at once. It's a mass process of everybody doing anything they think is a great idea.
So you don't seem to have a commanding structure there.
We have no command structure whatsoever. It's complete disorganisation. Which makes it work. Because there's nobody in charge. Everybody's able to. We have a set of guidelines and rules. As long as you follow them, that's great. But there is no organisation. It's disorganisation that makes it more workable.
Okay.
The rules they're not our rules. They're actually made from the group. The group's decided what rules they want to see and what they will implement. We haven't taken over and said you will do this, this, and this, and this. The whole entire group of Facebook group have made the rules themselves, not us. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, we can go on with the discussion in the panel. So thank you once again, and we'll move on to Yelena Olshanskaya and the White City project, which is.
Okay, now I understand what you.
Yes,
I really didn't.
I was looking for a line to start my presentation, and no. Yes, and I think I found one. I found a perfect line to start with. Can anybody guess what it is? It's a line. It's a line of people standing to a first McDonald's in Russia. 1991. Since, well, I don't have to tell you what happened in 1991, but since changing political and government systems in 1991, Russia has faced serious challenges in its effort to build a new country based on a free market instead of government planned and private property instead of communal ownership. Today, 26 years later, it is still a very painful process. And plans of the government of all levels meet a lot of criticism of the citizens. Breaking all the rules and all Soviet institutions didn't mean automatic appearance of effective new planning and operational cities and country systems. This is a major reason for increasing number of civil initiatives and organizations taking responsibility for the future of our cities and country. As somebody said, people taking initiatives in their hands, in their own hands. You can imagine with the previous people who were talking previously, they said that decision makers and us. You can imagine that this decision makers and us difference in Russia, it's much bigger than in the developed countries, because we're trying to build something that the project that I'd like to share with you is an acupuncture project. It's a perfect name, and it started in the center, very center of Moscow, as you can see. And you can see that is a building, very beautiful building. That history of this building goes back to 17th century. Being, at some point, being a house of Catherine the Great. Then for 100 years, it was a very prestigious educational place for all boys gymnasium for 100 years until the revolution. At the revolution time, it was closed. But another interesting history started. It was a communist university for Chinese workers with all the Chinese leaders, including Deng Xiaoping, for example, young Deng Xiaoping studying in this place. At that time, well, Pushkin Museum is our neighbor, Pushkin Museum of Arts, and at that time they were, as they were saying, publicly discussing big project that they call Territory of Culture. We can look, the pink one is the building, and the Pushkin Museum is something that is called Museum Town, but there's actually no town yet. It's a city fabric that with number of buildings that belong to Pushkin Museum. So when discussion started, it was mostly about functions of the buildings, increasing number of people, and square meters. How many square meters could be built? Meanwhile, we were working in our building, and our work is restoration and adaptation for a new function. Well, first thing that was obvious to do is to look at the surrounding area and look at what city can propose. What is the law of the city? What is the context of the place where do we live? And when we started to study the surrounding area, it was a lot of questions, and again, it was a lot of criticism, because a lot of things didn't make sense. They didn't fit, they didn't take in consideration, it was not taken in consideration a lot of tangible and intangible things. Because of that, we decided to start something on our own. The questions that were in front of us, how the city, and it's a very center of the city, and it's a city fabric that is almost 900 years old, how the city should develop, how to take in consideration everything that was good before and bring just a preservative of a time. It has to live, and a lot of people live in this beautiful city. But it was no answers. This is a symbol of our project that got named Territory of Culture, and that's where we started. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous because a lot of information that I'd like to tell you. Integrated approach. This was something that was absolutely missing. When we were talking to the city officials, it looked like all the departments are working separately without talking to each other. By the way, the word community doesn't have a translation to Russian language. So not having translation, meaning it just kind of doesn't exist. We do have a society. This is the closest one. As a big country, we do have organizations. But when we try to translate the community, what is really a community? As an engineer by my first profession, I understood that in order to improve something, first you have to know what you're actually dealing with. But none of us knew. And because of that, we decided to make this research project and to learn everything possible about the area in order to develop the strategy of development of ourselves, but not only to come to a certain conclusion and to a certain goal, but also to create a methodology of how to develop such a strategy, because none of us knew how to do it and where to start. And as much as I agree that it's not only for experts, but we decided to start with the experts. This is in short the scheme of our project. So we started with, we invited international team of experts to help us to study our area, because we needed a know-how and we needed a very scientific approach of studying that none of us knew. So we invited the experts we studied from Jan Gehl Architects and Professor Jan Gehl from Denmark. Soon it was clear that we needed to add transportation, then landscape, then lights with Philips. And our team did sociology, because in my understanding it was impossible to move without talking to people. Why we didn't start with people? Because every question you ask, without educating people, you really cannot expect a lot from them. But when you put something on the table to discuss, they do have an opinion. So the goal of the project was, the principles of the project was to create almost like university study. And I'm very happy to talk in university walls today. It has to be very independent, very open, and to include a lot of people, because we believe that success of the project would be found in inclusion, prioritizing broad consultation to create a sense of shared ownership and decision making. That's the word that I underline. But we started with an experts. This was the areas of studies. So landscape, we paid special attention to children in the city. This was a completely new and separate division. Public life in public spaces, mobility system as transport, light, of course history and history of the area and preserving of the cultural heritage of the area, and social ecosystem. This is the image that I decided to put here for a reason, because every time I try to explain our project, it always comes to my mind. It's like a power drop. When it drops into the water, and you see all these circles going around. So it, at the end of the day, it reaches the end of the lake. So with all these waves, and when I speak about the project, you will see that each stage is a new wave, because connecting more and more people, this was the point of the project. But the way how to connect it, this was the methodology that we were trying to create. So starting with experts, we realized that we need to do primary research, because there is no data available, because a lot of data, unfortunately, is closed for different reasons. And that's why we decided to collect the data ourselves. Here you can see volunteers, student volunteers. It was more than 200 people, not only architects and landscape designers. I don't know why it's running so fast, but also some of them were physics. young people, very ambitious, very creative, who wanted to participate and who wanted to make a difference. This is mental mapping. This was one of the ideas that was brought by our volunteers, by students from sociology. They decided to do it on themselves, and it was a fascinating result because they built a clean map of the neighborhood, and they were asking many people to put whatever they know, whatever they remember. And this is all the maps together. So it gave them opportunity to discuss the area from the social point of view. But with the methodology that we used, the students collect a lot of data, measuring streets, counting the people, counting the cars, counting the trees, driving the poles, asking parents, asking teenagers, going to schools, going to childcare centers, looking at the function. So at the end of the project, I could say that it was not piece of information missing. We knew everything about neighborhood. But the second idea was to put all of this together, because in the beginning, each group was working independently, a transportation group and landscape group and public space group. But it was more or less the same as the city works. The question, how to put them together. Let me scroll a little further. Oh, this was one of the children's studies. They were drawing a dangerous man in the city. It was a series of joint discussion by all the groups, and you can see, as you can see on these pictures. The next stage, well, after long run, after 3 interdisciplinary meetings that would take place in 2 months, 3 months time, we finally came up with a strategy. This is some of the maps. By the way, this is all the churches that were knocked down during the revolution from the neighborhood. This is some historical plans. This was supposed to be built. That was built instead. It's it's a lot of different research. So the next circle was lobbying. I intentionally used the word lobbying because I've been asked, how are you planning to lobby your project? Okay, you're doing all of this work, but how do you bring it to the city? How do you bring it to politicians? I'd like to say that I intentionally wanted it to be a non-political project, and I didn't want any politicians to be connected to that. But when I started to think about the word lobbying, I thought, yes, of course, we need to lobby, but we need to lobby it not between the politicians. We need to lobby it between local architects and local experts who is working with the city. And that's what we did. So our next circle was a series of consultations with local experts, criticizing, giving suggestions, giving advices. And the next circle was public hearing. Again, looking at the public hearing that we see in the city, it's really unsatisfying because it's a lot of talk and never good results. And a lot of them just, to put a mark. We did a public hearing. But how to do a public hearing? So we decided to go a new way. For us, new way. We need, in order to show it, we wanted to bring, to do visuals of our strategy. And the thing that you see here is the work of local architects who we invited to, based on the strategy that we developed, give us one of the visuals that how the, like transcript our beautiful words and beautiful vision into something that people could see and could understand. Interesting that when I started to talk of the head of the firm, of this very respectful Russian architect, he couldn't understand what I'm asking from him. He kept asking me, so who is my client? I'm working with a client. Who's my client? And I said, well, just imagine that your client is your children and grandchildren who is going to be living in this city. I'm not your client. I cannot tell you what to do. You really have to feel what you would like for this for the city. So with some of the drawings that architect did, we decided to do another circle, public hearing, exhibition. It was a summer exhibition of 2014 in Museum of Architecture in Moscow. And I think this was the beautiful way of public hearing, because we had a lot of response. We have a lot of people who was coming and looking at this. And then we had lectures and seminars all this time, explaining to the people the strategy. We had round tables inviting city specialists, the director of the Museum of Pushkin and Architecture. We were driving a lot of events on the streets for children, for people, explaining them ideas of urban planning and how could it be. We published the book, and that's the book I brought with me. This is some of the pages of the book. So another circle. Just a second. One of the explanations of the word of culture from the Cambridge English Dictionary, and I picked the short one. The culture is the way of life, the way we do things, the way we think, and the way we communicate. When we think of culture from this point of view, I understand that city is a territory of culture. That was the name of our project. And 2 years later, in one of the lines of previous presentations, I quote, effective participation in decision-making process. Participation in decision-making process. Yeah, I think it's important, but what is effective? What does really effective means? It's something probably that has positive outcome, making a difference in people's lives, something that gets implemented and something that would work for people. So a couple words about the results. This is Pushkin Museum plan. They came to us, they asked us for consultations, and we shared our results with them. And the findings of the project, the results of the project, the strategy that was built became part of the strategy of the development of Pushkin Museum. And transportational part was 100% part of the project of Pushkin Museum. This is a city program that started in 2016 called My Street City Initiative, Mayor's Initiative. We've been contacted by departments of the city, transportation department, to give our suggestions on our studies, based on our studies. And I'm very happy to see that a lot of results are actually used in this. I have to say it's impossible to live in a city last summer and this summer because it's 60 streets, 60 main streets in a city. But pedestrian areas are widening, trees are being planted, new lights have been installed, even the system for handicapped people and for carriages was installed. That was not the part of the city before. Our publishing project is developing, so we have more books. Back to the building, our restoration project is developed stronger than ever, and we're working on that now. This is something that I wanted to stop for a minute. Educational system. I think this is one of the biggest results this project achieved. Starting as writing the strategy, this very ambitious point, I think, yes, we did the strategy, but the most important thing we did with our project is educating people and contaminating them. All of them, all these young people, learn hands-on, not only in auditoriums, but also with best experts in the field, and they all went on. Some of them are working for the government, some of them did their university studies, some of them continue working for urban planning. And I think this was the major achievement of this project. Continuation, in our building, we support the School of Heritage, local School of Heritage, that is already 5th semester. And we are happy to support this initiative. So, just to give a couple words to conclusion, the question is how to make people participate. I think, in my opinion, the most important thing is for people to love their city and to love the place where they live. But in order to love, they really have to understand. Moscow is a huge city with 12 million people, a lot of people who come new, looking for a better job and for better life, and new generation growing and coming into the public realm. And a lot of them, they just don't understand. Even working with the young students, being with them on the street, we ask them about what they see and how do they look at the city. And they said, oh, these old buildings, knock down. We have to build something new, something of today. It was a very different response after the project, because they learn, because they were able to understand, and because they were able to fall in love with the city where they live. We finished the project 2 years ago, but till today I hear the echo, and it's very pleasant. People call, people ask. Tapani asked me to come and speak at the conference. People ask for the book, and we are sharing our knowledge. We are moving forward with other things, but we are very happy to share what we have, and if anyone interested, I will be happy to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions to Jelena? Has the planning department of Moscow changed their routines, have they become more open to participation as a result of your project, or is it the same as before?
We can see that they implemented the results. When we first saw a transportation model they were building it for our area, and we had a joint meeting, I quietly started to ask questions. For example, there's a bicycle line starting here and ending here. So what do you actually do with the bicycle after this? You come to this point? No answer. Do you know anything about Pushkin Museum? Do you know that they're increasing the number of people from 800,000 to 3 million? That's what they want. No, we didn't know. Do you know that there is a lot of buses coming to Pushkin Museum? Where to park these buses? We didn't take it in consideration. Do you know that Pushkin Museum brings a lot of paintings, and the customs are in the museum, so loading, unloading. This is all transportation questions. They said, "Can you connect us to a Pushkin Museum?" Which was very funny, because I'm just a citizen, and of course I gave them all the numbers, and I know they work successfully together, but the thing that the city accepted our transportation model, that was done by professionals. It was done by a mobility and chain company from Italy, who works in a lot of important projects in the city. So our transportation model that we work on in the project was completely taken by the city. They do listen. It might be not White City Project name on the on there, but it's absolutely fine with us, because our goal was to implement, to share, to achieve the positive result, and not to not to say that this is something that we did.
Thank you. Anna-Maja has a question.
Yes, can you tell us more how you established this, how you started this beautiful cooperation, how you got these 200 students to participate and so on?
As I said, the first team we started to work with was Gale Architect. And when we thought that we needed so much data that we didn't have, and just to put in perspective, even to get a city plan from the government, it's impossible. And you try to get a good copy, you may get prosecuted for that too. So in order to get a lot of data, we had to do this primary research. And it was through Facebook, through social media. We explained what we're trying to do, and we invited people to participate. And it was a tremendous response of the people. And that's why, and then by word of the mouth, people would bring their friends, their colleagues, and the circles were growing and growing.
Any other questions? Yes, please. Have the mic, please.
Now, I just want to ask, how did you finance this project? Because it's fantastic that you were able to raise the local from the children, but you also brought in a lot of international companies, etc.
Yes, this is important. This is a very important question. It was privately financed. We did it through our company because we didn't want anybody from the side to tell us what to do. Not government organizations, not any development or any other names that could be influential of decision making. It had to be a very scientific study. This was our goal, not just because we want something, but because it was an idea to figure it out, what is the best for people and what the people want and how do they see it. But in order to do that, it had to be very independent. So we did have our private financing. of the program. Yes, I know it's unusual, but yes, that's how it was. I have to tell you, a lot of people were thinking that I'm completely out of my mind when I started it. But, well, now it has its own legacy, and it's well recognized in the city between the experts, between the architects, and between the citizens. And I am happy to say that no political connection helps these days, because you can have your own opinion, and it's not political. It's what's good for people, and it's what's good for the city. One thing probably I would say to finish, that I was always thinking that for politicians, the way that politicians think, they need the voters, they need the votes. And when they do something what is good for people, but it's not very hard for them actually, it's going to work. So we just need to give them the ideas, what is good for people and not hard for them to implement. And they can use it in their campaigns. And and that's what this project of the city is about. Mayor is really trying to show that they do things for people and they listen. People need more trees. Okay, here you are, you have more trees. It's not difficult, but it has to be right solutions. So they're not always very expensive. They're not. It just need to be put in the right set, in the right perspective.
Yes. If there are no further questions, then thanks for Jelena for presenting us this fascinating project. And we have a slight change in the schedule. Yes. So Anna-Maja, would you like to tell us what to do next?
So, we have spent more time than we were thinking. And then we were thinking about this program, that there is this forum conclusions. Can you hear me? No, now is the microphone. We have these forum conclusions, so why not to have the panel in the end, when you really can comment everything then? Are you fine with that change of Aracel and Astrid as well, and speakers as well, that if you come then after the workshops, and then we can eat in time, and people are maybe a bit happier. I wanted to tell as well something. I'm a council member of Europa Nostra, and I was coordinating this congress in Finland. And firstly, I would like to tell that I'm very proud of Europa Nostra. It's a genuine NGO, really transmitting worries from really grassroots level to really high level, to give them publicity, and at the same time is cooperating with European Union and with really high level policymakers in order to improve the conditions of people working with heritage. For example, this year 2018, next year European Cultural Heritage Team Year, we have been, or Europa Nostra, not me personally, has worked very hard for that, and it's a chance to take up things. When we started to plan this congress, we thought that would be nice to do things that we love the most ourselves, to have very good content and very good conversations. And what do you think? Until now? Okay. Yeah, nice to hear. And in order to have good content, we thought that we want to give something to very grassroots level, people with the everyday problems trying to save heritage. And then this participation felt like very proper team for that. And because we wanted that, it was Hanna's idea, Hanna Lamsa's idea that because if you talk about participation, we have to be participative ourselves. So we sent an email last spring to all members of Europa Nostra, and we asked, would they like to present some excellent projects? And that's how we found Helen, Lion, and Richard, for example. And as well, we had a planning work group to have a very proper academic content, and we have had a very beautiful cooperation with Turku University researchers. Thank you, and Susi Thomas from Helsinki University, and thank you so much, Susi Thomas, and Mauno Häyrynen, and Katriina Siivonen, and Jussi-Pekka Taavitsainen, and Sirkku Piilman and all others, Pauliina Latvala, for your contribution for this seminar. And we wanted that this has a proper outcome, this conversation, that we are just not talking and then leaving home. And we are publishing a book out of the content of this forum. And as well, we are like in Madrid last year, they had a forum talking about the same team participation, and they had a manifest. And so we thought that, okay, let's make a manifest as well. We have drafted it from using the content of speakers, that the material that they sent it beforehand. Leah Gillard, this is very well presented now in the draft, and so on. But anyway, we want to be democratic in that as well, and we hope that those who are able to come to this evening program that we have to Saili Island, we have a boat trip to Saili Island. I hope that as many as possible would come to this red boat Lily, and if you, or at least if you have any opinions about it, what would you like to have in that manifest, that you come there and you tell what would you like to, what you think that it is the most important thing. And we have this, Astrid has promised to lead that conversation. It looks a bit challenging, but we try our best that everybody is happy with the result. And Snežka Kadlik Mihailovic, the General Secretary of Europa Nostra, has promised to read it tomorrow in Excellence Fair.
Would it not be more appropriate if Stephanie reads it?
Okay. Well, somebody reads that in Excellence Fair tomorrow, and maybe we can even have comments from a European Union level even. And that's it. Did I tell everything important? Yes, this is recorded, and afterwards we send the links. Yes, the workshops. Now we go to workshops, yes. Before workshops, we of course, we go to have a lunch. And this is, it was not intentional, but now I'm actually quite happy because the program is very intensive, that you have some exercise. We are moving from building to another building time to time, and get fresh air at the same time. So at the moment we are in, we were here first, and we will continue. Now we are here, and for lunch we go to Agora building here, and we will have parallel workshops, presentations of maximum 10 minutes. Please have discipline in that. And Then we have workshops. The first one is here, New Tools of Heritage Activism. And second one is How to Commit People and Why, and that's in Agora building. You can stay there after the lunch. There's people who guide you to the correct lecture room. And third workshop is Cases of Human Rights and Legislation. And then we come after that, those workshops, we come back here, and we have the panel that was promised, and chairman of these workshops, they have chance to present short conclusions of the workshop. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy.